what that means for all of us is that we need to prepare our hearts for Sundays.
Yeah.
You don't just roll in cold.
Yeah.
I mean, you like, Lord, speak to me. And the Lord may speak through the singing, prayer, a testimony. He might speak through the sacraments. He might speak through the preaching of the word. He's going to be speaking if we listen, if we have ears to hear. But if we just roll in cold and we're not praying, Lord, help me to have a heart to be responsive. Help me to recognize this is a completely different context of all the 168 hours I have in a week. This is the most important. This is Fixed on Jesus. Hey everybody, welcome back to Fixed on Jesus. This is that podcast. It's kind of a runaway train that meanders and careens here and there and everywhere, but we get to do it together. My name is Rich, and I'm joined by Mark Johnson Jr. How you doing, Mark?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. Okay.
All right.
And
well,
as
I
always,
don't know.
What's that?
Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. And as always, behind the glass, we have Heather Corbitt, who is now, she has no need of sound effects, but because she can make her own sound, right, Heather?
Yes.
Okay. So what are we talking about today, Mark?
Well, I think we're going to talk about the elephant in the room first and foremost.
Okay, friends.
Depending on when you hear this, you may or may not have seen
the whole big side. This is going to be a dog and pony show nobody wants, but go ahead.
That's all right. Okay, we'll let them decide. The light's shining on you a different way because there's a shiner on your eye.
Yes, I have a black eye.
Our legion of fans want to know what happened.
Well, first of all, there's a good reason why this is only audio. One,
because so no one can see that black eye you got.
Well, and I have a face for radio, right? And so, there's that. And so, but yes, I do have, I'm sporting on my right eye a black eye bruise. Yes, that's correct.
I was just talking to him before we started just to make sure that we didn't have to get him into some men's recovery or some reaching out and making sure he's not a battered male.
I am not that. Nope.
And we're joking about that because that didn't happen. So you want to tell the story or you want to just...
I'll tell the story. It's just like, it's one thing to have exciting and cool injury stories that are great, but this is not. This is stupid, which most of my injuries are stupid. I was on Fridays, I go to Costco and...
You shouldn't have told them that. There's going to be people showing up at Costco.
No, they're not. They don't care what I do. In Costco, as you know, they say, do you want a box? I want a box every time because you can carry your stuff in, right? And so I'm carrying everything in and I put the box down in the laundry room and unload the things into the freezer that's in the laundry room. And as I go to pass from the laundry room to the rest of the house, I had this box, which was like a kind of a thick box that was...
Real thick.
Yeah. And so I was carrying it and I got distracted, looked down the box. As I was holding the box, it hit the door and the corner of the box hit my eye.
Okay.
And it was, I'm telling you, that's what happened, but it's a stupid story, but that's what happened.
All right. Well, so there you have it. Our pastor was in Costco getting toilet paper on a Friday on his day off, and then he was doing laundry, and next thing you know, he has a black eye.
Yeah, no.
Close.
This is how rumors get started, Mark.
That's box 1, Rich 0.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I destroyed the box.
I hope so.
No, I didn't. It's on the back patio waiting for my kids to take it to recycle. So.
Okay. Well, he recycles too. Well, anyways, our actual topic.
Yes.
Worship. What is worship?
Worship.
We hear that word tossed around a lot.
Yeah, what are some of the ways you've heard it tossed around?
Mostly in the context of music or Sunday morning.
Right, yeah.
Or in the car, I like to worship before I go to work.
Worship music, right? Yeah, exactly. I think when we talk about the word worship, we need to recognize that it's a category much bigger than we normally think, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we can isolate worship to only the singing portion of our Sunday morning service. And in fact, when I was growing up in the tradition I grew up in, we would say there was praise and worship. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
So the praise songs were faster.
Okay.
The worship songs were slower.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that? That was how it was for us. Like, at least that
So you
was
praise and then you worship. They're separate.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they weren't the same.
All right.
The praise songs were a little bit more upbeat. People were clapping and more excited.
Okay.
The worship
You
songs
do a mixture of
slow
both
down.
now.
Nope, that's a false dichotomy.
Okay.
So, but the worship songs were just a little less boisterous, and back then it's like It Only Takes a Spark. Do you know that song?
No, go ahead. Can you sing it?
I cannot
Please?
sing it. I will not sing
I'm
it.
condemned from singing, but you're not.
Well,
You're shining like a star too with that eye.
It's because I know my limitations and you do not.
Okay.
Do you know Heather knows It Only Takes a Spark, right, Heather? Yeah. So
It only takes a spark. Does it go like that?
No, my ears are bleeding now. My ears are bleeding. But anyway, worship is actually something we do every moment of every day. We are, as humans, we're creatures that worship. We will worship something all the time.
Yeah.
So we don't ever have a moment we're not worshiping something, right? And so in a real, like the broadest way, worship is part of life. It is all of life, right? And so we need to recognize that worship is not just singing. And even when it comes to Sunday morning, when you have the Sunday morning gathering of the local church, worship is every element of that gathering. It's not just the singing. And so worship involves prayer. It involves Bible reading. It involves the celebration of the sacraments.
Yeah.
It involves preaching, and it involves singing. And so I think a lot of times we think worship is this one small little category, and that category is singing.
Yeah.
But that's not the way the scriptures communicate what worship is. Worship is, as Bob Coughlin, who's one of my friends and done a lot of work on this, he famously said, worship is all of life, right? And that's the truth. And so that's kind of the big answer when it comes to worship.
Yeah, no, that's great. Before we go into, I want to go into Sunday morning, but before that, just kind of as you were saying that, would idolatry be defined as worship of things that are not in what you just said? Like, we're beings that worship. We're either worshiping God.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole. So like, we're worshiping false gods on many levels, right? And
Right.
so like, if we offer fealty to money or leisure or sex or anything, is essentially we're propping those things up to be false gods.
Right. Okay.
And so absolutely, yeah, that's the negative side of it.
Yeah. Like, okay, so for Sunday,
Yeah.
Why should we sing?
Yeah, and I think so. Even though worship is more than just singing, singing is an element of worship, and it's an important element. And so, like, in fact, music is an aid to help us sing, and so like sometimes musicians can get all locked up about this because they're going to say that music is a necessary element in worship, and I think it's a helpful element, but not as necessary as they might think sometimes. I'm with them. I mean, we have on Sunday morning, if you come to our church on Sunday morning, we have guitars, both electric and acoustic. We have a bass, we have drums, we have piano, we have people who are singing. Sometimes we have a cello. We have all kinds of instruments, but the instruments are in service to the worship, right?
Yeah.
We're not shooting for a concert. So there are churches out there that the worship band is there to perform and for the people to watch, right?
Some of them are brought from the outside.
There's like in some of the big secret churches, they will pay the musicians to play on the stage.
And they're not members of the church.
Well, they may not even be Christians.
Yeah.
I know of some personally where they're not Christians. They're really good musicians.
Yeah.
And so they bring in the best musicians, pay them a lot of money so that they play, and it's a concert, right? So when we gather and sing, we're not doing a concert. So you'll notice when we gather, we're not going to be dimming the lights. We're not going to be using laser lights. We're not going to be using, smoke machines. We're not going to be doing that stuff because all of those things sort of give an impression of this is a performance for you to observe. But when we gather and sing, this is something for us all to participate in.
Yeah.
Right? And so like every week we have after the first song what's called a call to worship. This is where whoever's leading the worship team, this is where they say, here's a reason for us to sing today. And so we sing together. And so singing is important because, like Colossians 3:16 says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. So when we sing, we're not just singing to the Lord, we're singing to each other. There's something that happens when the body of Christ gathers together and we take these songs and proclaim them. We're proclaiming biblical truth to each other, right?
Yeah.
And so there's something that happens that's different than if you have a playlist that's quote unquote worship music in your car. That's good, but it's not the same thing. When we all gather together and sing, we are proclaiming true things about the Lord to the Lord and to each other. And it gives us an opportunity. This is the only time we have this opportunity when you gather with your local church. You get together and you hear other people singing to the Lord. You hear other people proclaiming true things about the Lord, and it builds your faith. And you're like, hey, I'm not the only one. Because we live in a world and in a culture that loves music.
Yeah.
And puts up all kinds of different false gods to worship. When we gather on Sunday, what we're doing is we're reminding ourselves there is one God, and there's only one God who's worthy of worship. And I'm not the only one who believes that.
Right.
Even though I might be the only one at work, at school, on my block that believes this kind of thing, I'm not as alone as I thought. Right. And I can hear the person next to me singing, and I know that they're going through something with one of their kids, or I know that this person over there is a caregiver to her parents, or I know this person over here is just lost their job, and yet they're singing, communicating trust to the Lord with their song. And so it's this wonderful corporate expression of faith that's completely unique.
Yeah, love it. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but how does that definition dictate the types of songs or the selection of songs that we use on a Sunday morning?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Music has a power, right? Because when we introduce a song, there's a way in which our minds can remember it because of the music. Like, nobody is going to walk away, remembering the exact words I preach on a sermon, but they will with songs.
Yeah.
And so so that's one of the things that's a blessing here, is that we want to take the truth of the scriptures, and embed them in a different way in our minds and hearts, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons if you look up on our screens and you see what we're singing, you'll notice that there are scripture references on the screens most of the time, so that you can recognize where these songs originate from.
Shout out to Heather.
Heather does all that work, right? And so
she oversees it.
She does. Well, she's shaking her head no, but anyway, she does a lot with that. And so, because the Bible is a God-centered book, we want our singing to be God-centered as well.
Yeah.
Right? It's possible to sing songs about how I'm going to be brave and how I'm going to be strong. It's possible to sing man-centered songs that are focused on experience, right? And sometimes you get this kind of song, which is like, and I'm going to be consecrated, and I'm going to be this, and I'm going to do that. And the focus then becomes on like ourselves instead of God and his word, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll notice that the pattern of our songs it's focusing us on who God is, how good he is, who the Son of God is, and why we can trust him, right? And not necessarily always on my problems or troubles, right? And this is not the kind of song that's popular on K-Love, right? And so if you're thinking, well, why don't we sing songs that are on K-Love? And a lot of times it's because those songs, like, listen to those songs and ask yourself, do they point toward the Lord or do they point toward me?
Mm.
And so we're going to in our singing try to embed songs in our minds and hearts that point toward the Lord and not toward me and my experiences.
Love it. Okay, so you laid a good foundation in understanding worship, especially on a Sunday morning, in regards to what songs and how we're all worshiping and singing together. How does that relate to the outward expression during worship? So just give you a quick context.
Yeah.
I had a dinner conversation with Becca Litz and Michelle and Zach Tripoli.
Yeah.
About the contents of one's heart and how that relates to their outward expression during worship. And there was a lot of thoughts about that. So I was just wondering what you thought.
Well,
or I guess I can even ask a more direct question if that would be helpful.
Well, maybe I'll try to answer it, and if I
Sure.
don't, you can ask.
Okay.
I think some people are not as there's lots of different personality styles in the room, right? Some people are not expressive by nature, and so, but they're engaged in their heart, right?
Right.
Some people are, let's just say, they're drama and they're extra, right? And so, like, they're gonna
Oh, Heather's
probably
choking.
Heather, are you okay
Hang
over
on,
there?
we gotta do some CPR.
And in my experience, those kind of folks are more willing to be expressive in worship, right? And so some of it's personality style, right?
Yeah.
And so, one of the ways I've thought about in the past is I want to be most excited about what I'm singing on Sunday, and I want to be most expressive about that more so than a football game. So if I'm more eager to cheer and go crazy at a football game than I am on Sunday morning, something's wrong. Like, I want that to be where I'm most excited. I want that to be where I'm most passionate, right? And I want, however I express that passion physically, whether it be with arms raised or clapping or, whatever, I want to do that in worship.
So you're saying it's relative to you as an individual, as in, like, your highest extremity and your lowest. Worship on a Sunday should be the upper echelon of your extremity.
I think what I want to do is say everybody should examine that for themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make an external standard that's totally arbitrary without understanding where people are coming from, right?
Gotcha.
I've talked to a lot of people who are like, I just don't like to sing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you know what? You need to obey the word of God.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you like.
Yeah.
It matters that you're called as a Christian to sing. And so you're in disobedience if you don't sing. So whether you like it or not. I mean, I don't like eating greens, but I have to eat greens, I don't like waking up early, but sometimes I have to wake up early,
Right.
And so we're all called to make a joyful noise because it gives an expression to something that we may not always be thinking about.
Okay. So just to follow up, do you think that, I mean, obviously you explained that it's relative to each individual. Can you judge the contents of someone's heart based on their outward expression?
No, I don't think so. I think you can ask if you have a good enough relationship with this person, you can ask questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew the most expressive lady in worship I ever saw was living a double life and committed adultery. So, but that doesn't mean all the expressive people we should be thinking, what are they trying to hide?
Yeah.
No, I think everybody's different. Like, if I know somebody and I've watched them in different venues, and let's say at the ASU game, they're painted maroon and gold, right? And they come to church and they're super, super reserved. I'm like, okay, something's wrong, right?
Yeah.
But if the drama extra people are dramatic and extra in every area of their life, okay, great. That seems to fit, right? And so, I mean, there are some people who will cry at at a McDonald's commercial, right? And there's some people...
Really?
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. And there's some people who don't cry.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to set some external standard. Well, you have to clap 12 times and raise your hands 3 times in a month. And if you don't, I'm not doing that. That. But I do think expression in worship is important because it shows what you care about.
Right.
I wanted to add something to this too, because being someone who is extra, which is why I was choking when you said that, it is an interesting concept though to understand that your heart being in the right place at the right time plays a huge factor into it. Because for me personally, I can be very expressive, and if you've spent 5 minutes with me, you know that. But I can also be in a place where the Lord is working on me, and I'm not going to express much because a lot is happening in here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting concept listening to you guys talk about this. Like, what does worship really look like?
Yeah.
And what does it mean? And what is it?
Well, there's singing, and singing is a subset of worship. Worship... And so worship's the big category, and singing is just one expression of that, right?
Right, exactly.
And so, we have to keep that in mind. Now, I do think there's something different if you're leading the church in worship, right? So the people on stage are not just musicians; they're lead worshipers.
Yeah.
And so they should be more expressive. They should look like they believe what they're singing.
Yeah.
which means their faces, are going to look like, hey, this is joyful, or,
Yeah.
and so like there should be some level expression there, because it's not a performance, right? And so that a lot of that, what that means for all of us is that we need to prepare our hearts for Sundays.
Yeah.
You don't just roll in cold.
Yeah.
I mean, you like, Lord, speak to me. And the Lord may speak through the singing, prayer, a testimony. He might speak through the sacraments. He might speak through the preaching of the word. He's going to be speaking if we listen, if we have ears to hear. But if we just roll in cold and we're not praying, Lord, help me to have a heart to be responsive. Help me to recognize this is a completely different context of all the 168 hours I have in a week. This is the most important.
Yes.
And so, like, I want to prepare in a greater way for Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Than for going to work.
Yeah.
I want to prepare in a greater way for Sunday morning than if I go on a date night with my wife. I want to prepare in a greater way for Sunday morning than any other time, any other thing I do.
Love it. Two things. First one, I recently got a devotional that's for Sunday mornings to help prepare your heart.
Tripp, right.
Paul David Tripp, Sunday Matters.
Yeah, right.
It's great.
It is, yeah.
Walking into church after reading through that.
It helps, yeah. That's a good tool.
Mind frame or heart frame.
That's a good tool, absolutely.
And then you mentioned a little bit about the people up front. So what impact does the level of expression in the environment you're in, is it supposed to affect your worship, or is it just a personal thing with the Lord?
I mean, it's easier if other people around you are being expressive, right? And so, I don't know. I mean, it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's both. I want us to be excited about the right things. I want us to be impacted by the right things. That's the Lord and his purposes. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, any other things you'd like to add before we?
I think if you have questions on this, let me know. If you are interested in, maybe let me know if you think, I'd love a whole podcast on how to prepare for Sunday. I think we should do that. But anyway, just if you have thoughts, just email us at production@centergilbert.com and we'll get to them.
Yep. Thank you guys for tuning in. We love you. Check the show notes. Check for polls. Feel free to share this with a friend. And yeah, thanks for supporting them.
All right. See you next time.